9. Access control list and shared directory management. In the previous chapter, we reviewed the basics of discretionary access control. Normal Linux file and directory permission settings aren't very granular. With an access control list, ACL, we can fine-tune things to get the exact set of permissions that we really want. We can also use this capability to control access to files and shared directories. The topics in this chapter include the following: creating an ACL for either user or group, creating an inherited ACL for a directory, removing a specific permission by using an ACL mask, using the tar ACLS option to prevent loss of ACLs during a backup, creating a user group and adding members to it, creating a shared directory for a group, setting the SGID bit and the sticky bit on the shared directory, using ACLs to access files in the shared directory, creating an ACL for either user or group. The normal Linux file and directory permission settings are okay, but they're not very granular. With an ACL, we can allow only a certain person to access a file or directory, or we can allow multiple people to access a file or directory with different permissions for each person. If we have a file or directory that's wide open for everyone, we can use an ACL to allow different levels of access for either a group or an individual. Toward the end of the chapter, we'll put what we learned all together in order to manage a shared directory for a group. You would use the getFACL to view an ACL for a file or directory. Note that you can't use it to view all files in a directory at once. To begin, let's use the getFACL to see if we have any ACLs already set on the ACL demo.txt file. Touch ACL demo.txt, getFACL ACL demo.txt. All we see here are just the normal permission settings, so there's no ACL. The first step for setting an ACL is to remove all permissions from everyone except for the user of the file. That's because the default permission settings will allow members of the group to have read-write access and others to have read access. So setting an ACL without removing those permissions will be rather senseless. Chmod 600 ACL demo.txt ls-l ACL demo.txt. When using setFACL to set an ACL, you can allow a user or group to have any combination of read, write, or execute privileges. In our case, let's say that I want to let Maggie read the file and to prevent her from having write or execute privileges. setFACL-m u :Maggie :r ACL _demo.txt. getFACL. The M option of setACL means that we're about to modify the ACL. Well, to create one in this case, but that's okay. U means that we're setting an ACL for a user. We then list the user's name, followed by another column and the list of permissions that we want to grant to this user. In this case, we're only allowing Maggie read access. We complete serve command by listing the file to which we want to apply this ACL. The getFACL output shows that Maggie does indeed have read access. Finally, we see in the ls-l output that the group is listed as having read access, even though we set the 600 permission settings on the file. But there's also a plus sign which tells us that the file has an ACL. When we set an ACL, the permissions for the ACL show up as group permissions in ls-l. To take this a step further, let's say that I want Frank to have read-write access to this file. setFACL-m u :Frank :rw ACL demo.txt. getFACL. So we can have two or more different ACLs assigned to the same file. In the ls-l output, we see that we have our W permission set for the group, which is really just a summary of permissions that we've set in the two ACLs. We can set an ACL for group access by replacing U with a G. getFACL new file.txt. Chmod 600 new file.txt. setFACL-m g :accounting r new file.txt. getFACL new file.txt. ls-l new file.txt. Members of the accounting group now have read access to this file. Creating an inherited ACL for a directory. There might be times where you want all files that get created in a shared directory to have the same ACL. We can do that by applying an inherited ACL to the directory. Although I understand that even though this sounds like a cool idea, creating files in the normal way will cause files to have the read-write permission set for the group and the read permission set for others. So if you're setting this up for a directory where users just create files normally, the best that you can hope to do is to create an ACL that adds either the write or execute permissions for someone. Either that or ensure the users set to 600 permission settings on all files that they create, assuming that users really do need to restrict access to their files. On the other hand, if you're creating a shell script that creates files in a specific directory, you can include chmod commands to ensure that the files get created with the restrictive permissions that are necessary to make your ACL work as intended. To demo, let's create the new permd directory and set the inherited ACL on it. We want to have read-write access for files that my shell script creates in this directory, and for Frank to only have read access. I don't want anyone else to be able to read any of these files. Set facl-m d u frank r new permd ls-ld. All I had to do to make this an inherited ACL was to add d column before u column frank. I left the default permission settings on the directory, which allows everyone to read access to the directory. Next, I'll create the Donny_script, this h shell script, which will create a file within that directory, and that will set read-write permissions only the user of the new files. After making the script executable, I run it and view the results. So new file.txt got created with the correct permission settings and with an ACL that allows Frank to read it. I know that this is a really simplified example, but you get the idea. Removing a specific permission by using an ACL mask. You can remove an ACL from a file or directory with the X option. Let's go back to the ACL-demo.txt file that I created earlier and remove the ACL for Maggie. Set facl-x u column Maggie ACL-demo.txt. Get f-ACL. So Maggie's ACL is gone, but the X option removes the entire ACL, even if it's not what you really want. So if you have an ACL with multiple permissions set, you might just want to remove one permission, leaving the others. Here we see that Frank still has his ACL that grants him read-write access. Let's now say that we want to remove the write permissions while still allowing him to read the read permission. For that, we'll need to apply a mask. Set facl-m column r ACL-demo.txt ls-l-acl-demo.txt get f-acl-demo.txt m column r sets a read-only mask on the ACL. Running get f-acl shows that Frank still has a read-write ACL, but the comment to the side shows his effective permissions to be read-only. So Frank's permission for the file is now gone, and if we had ACLs set for other users, this mask would affect them the same way. Using the tar ACLS option to prevent the loss of ACLs during a backup. The tar utility is a very handy tool for creating compressed archive files of your important directories. The only catch is that when you use it on files that have attached ACLs, you'll need to use the ACLS option to prevent the loss of your ACLs. In this directory, you'll see that ACLS have been assigned to the bottom two files. cd permd ls-l. Now I'll do a backup without --acls cd tar cjvf permd backup tar.xz. Looks good, right? But looks can be deceiving. Watch what happens when I delete the directory and then restore it from the backup. rm-rf permd tar xjvf permd backup tar.xz permd cd ls-l. I don't even have to use getFactCL to see that this ACLs are gone from the perm-demo directory on all of its files because the plus signs are now gone. Now let's see what happens when I include the ACLS option. First, I'll show you that an ACLL is set for this directory and its only file, ls-ll ld ls-l Now I'll use the tar command with the ACLS option. Tar cjvf new permdir backup tar xz new permdir -- ACLS new permdir. I'll now delete the new permdir directory and restore it from backup. As we did before, we'll use the ACLS option. Remove -rf new permdir tar xjvf new permdir backup tar xz ACLS new permdir lsld. The presence of the plus signs indicates that the ACLs did survive the backup and restore procedure. This one slightly tricky part about this is that you must use ACLs for both the backup and the restoration. If you omit the option either time, you will lose your ACLs. You might be wondering if your preferred backup or archive tool needs any special options to set in order to preserve ACLs. Well, I don't know, because it's impossible for me to investigate everything that's available. If you need to backup or archive files that have ACLs set, your best bet is to consult the documentation for your archive or backup software. Now let's talk about user groups. Creating a user group and adding members to it. So far I've been doing all of the demos inside my own home directory just for the sake of showing the basic concepts, but the eventual goal is to show you how to use this knowledge to do something more practical, such as controlling file access in shared directories. Let's say that we want to create a marketing group for members of, you guessed it, the marketing department. Sudo group add marketing. Let's now add some members. We can do that in 3 different ways. Add members as we create the user accounts. Use user mod to add members that already have user accounts. Edit the etc group file. Adding members as we create the user accounts. First, we can add members to the group as we create the user accounts using the G option of user add. On Red Hat or Linux or CentOS, the command would look like this. Sudo user add -G marketing Cleopatra. On Debian Ubuntu, the command will look like this. Sudo user add -m-d home Cleopatra -s bin bash -g marketing Cleopatra. And of course, I'll need to assign Cleopatra a password in a normal manner, sudo password Cleopatra, using user mod to add an existing user to a group. The good news is that this works the same on either Red Hat, CentOS, or Linux or Debian Ubuntu. Sudo user mod -a-g marketing Maggie. In this case, the A wasn't necessary because Maggie wasn't a member of any other secondary group, but if she had already belonged to another group, the -A would have been necessary to keep from overwriting any existing group information, thus removing her from the previous groups. This method is especially handy for use on Ubuntu systems where it is necessary to use user add in order to create encrypted home directories. As we saw in a previous chapter, add user doesn't give you the chance to add a user to a group as you create the account. Adding users to a group by editing the etc group file. This final method is a good way to cheat to speed up the process of adding multiple existing users to a group. First, open the etc group file in your favorite text editor and look for the line that defines the group to which you want to add members. So I already added Cleopatra and Maggie to this group. Let's edit this into a couple more members. When you're done, save the file and exit the editor. Group command for each of them will show that our wee bit of cheating works just fine. Sudo them group. Groups. This method is extremely handy for whenever you need to add lots of members to a group at the same time. Creating a shared directory. The next act in our scenario involves creating a shared directory that all the members of our marketing department can use. Now, this is another one of those areas that endangers a bit of controversy. Some people like to push shared directories in the root level of the system, while others like to push shared directories in the /home directory. Some people even have other preferences, but really it's a matter of personal preference and or company policy. Other than that, it really doesn't much matter where you put them. For our purposes, to make things simple, I just create the directory in the root level of the file system. cd root sudo marketing ls-ld. The new directory belongs to the root user, has a permission
setting of 755, which permits read and execute access to everybody and write access only to the root user. What we really want is to only allow members of the marketing department to access this directory. We'll first change ownership and group association, and then we'll set the proper permissions. Sudo tone nobody at column marketing sudo chmod 770 marketing ls-ld. In this case, we don't have any one particular user that we want to own the directory, and we don't really want the root user to own it. So assigning ownership to the nobody sudo user account gives us a way to deal with that. I then assigned the 770 permissions value to the directory, which allows read, write, execute access to all marketing group members while keeping everyone else out. Now let's let one out of our group members log in to see if she can create a file in this directory. su-wiki cd marketing ls/l. Okay, it works, except for one minor problem. The file belongs to Vicky as it should, but it's also associated with Vicky's personal group. For the best access control of these shared files, we need them to be associated with a marketing group. Let's take care of that next. Setting the sgit bit and the sticky bit on the shared directory. I've told you before that it's a bit of a security risk to set either the suite or sgit permissions on files, especially on executable files, but it is both completely safe and very useful to set sgit on a shared directory. Sgit's behavior on a directory is completely different from sgit from behavior on a file. On a directory, sgit will cause any files that anybody creates to be associated with the same group with which the directory is associated. So, bearing in mind that the sgit permission value is 2000, let's set sgit on our marketing directory. sudo chmod 2770 marketing ls-ld. The S in the executable position for the group indicates that the command was successful. Let's now let a Vicky log back in to create another file, su-wiki cd/marketing touch Vicky file to txt. ls-l. Vicky's second file is associated with the marketing group, which is just what we want, just for fun. Let's let Charlie do the same. su-charlie cd marketing touch charlie file txt ls-l. Again, Charlie's file is associated with the marketing group, but for some strange reason that nobody understands, Charlie really doesn't like Vicky and decides to delete her files just out of pure spite. Remove Vicky remove write protected regular empty file Vicky file txt y ls-l. The system complains that Vicky's original file is write protected since it's still associated with her personal group, but the system does still allow Charlie to delete it even without sudo privileges. And since Charlie has write access to the second file due to its association with the marketing group, the system allows him to delete it without question. Okay, so Vicky complains about this and tries to get Charlie fired, but our intrepid administrator has a better idea. He'll just set a sticky bit in order to keep this from happening again. Since the sgit bit has a value of 2000 and the sticky bit has a value of 1000, we can just add the two together to get a value of 3000. sudo chmod 3770 marketing ls-ld. The T in the executable position for others indicates that the sticky bit has been set. Since the T is uppercase, we note that the executable permission for others has not been set. Having the sticky bit set will prevent group members from deleting anybody else's file. Let's let Vicky show us what happens when she tries to retaliate against Charlie. su-wiki cd marketing ls-l. Remove Charlie file.txt. Remove cannot remove Charlie file.txt. Operation not permitted. Remove -f Charlie file.txt. Remove cannot remove Charlie file.txt. Operation not permitted. ls-l. Even with the F option, Vicky still can't delete Charlie's file because it doesn't have Vicky doesn't have sudo privileges on the system, so it would be useless for her to try that. Using ACL to access files in the shared directory. As things currently stand, all members of the marketing group have read-write access to all other groups' members' files. Restricting access to a file to only specific group members is the same two-step process that we already covered, setting the permissions and creating the ACL. First, Vicky sets the normal permissions to only allow herself to have read-write permissions on the file. Then she'll create an ACL that will allow Cleopatra to read the file. Echo, this file is only for my good friend Cleopatra, greater than sign Vicky file txt. Chmod 600 Vicky file txt. Set f acl-mu column Cleopatra column r Vicky file txt. ls-l. Get f acl Vicky file txt. There's nothing here that you haven't already seen. Vicky just remove all permissions from the group and from members and set an ACL that only allows Cleopatra to read the file. Let's see if Cleopatra actually can read it. su-Cleopatra cd marketing ls-l cat Vicky file txt. So far, so good. But can Cleopatra write to it? Let's take a look. Echo, you're my friend too. Vicky, greater than sign Vicky file txt. Bash, Vicky file txt, permission denied. Cleopatra can do that since Vicky only allowed her the read privilege in the ACL. Now though, what about that sneaky Charlie who wants to go snooping in other users' files? Let's see if Charlie can do it. su-Charlie cd marketing cat Vicky file txt, cat Vicky file txt, permission denied. So yes, it's really true that only Cleopatra can access Vicky's file, and even then only for reading. Hands-on lab creating a shared group directory. For this lab, you'll just put together everything that you've learned in this chapter to create a shared directory for a group. You can do this on any of your virtual machines. On any virtual machine, create the sales group, sudo group add sales, create the users Mimi, Mr. Gray and Mommy, adding them to the sales group as you create the accounts. On CentOS or Linux, do this: sudo user add J sales Mimi, sudo user add J sales Mr. Gray, sudo user add J sales Mommy. On Ubuntu, do this: use sudo user add -m-d home Mimi -a bin bash -g sales Mimi, sudo user add md home Mr. Gray as bin bash g sales Mr. Gray, sudo user add md home my s bin bash g sales mummy. Assign each user a password. Create the sales directory and the root level of the file system. Set proper ownership and permissions, including the JIT and sticky bits. Sudo macdir sales sudo cho nobody sales sudo chmod 3770 sales ls-ld sales. Log in as Mimi and have her create a file. su/Mimi cd dash Mimi cd/sales echo this file belongs to Mimi greater than sign Mimi file txt ls-l. Have Mimi set an ACL on her file, allowing all the Mr. Gray to read it, then have Mimi log back out. Chmod 600 Mimi file txt set f acl-mu Mr. Gray r Mimi file txt get f acl Mimi file txt ls-l exit. Have Mr. Gray log in to see what he can do with Mimi's file, then have Mr. Gray create his own file and log back out.
Mommy will now log in and try to wreak havoc by snooping in all the users' files and by trying to delete them. End of lab. Summary. In this chapter, we saw how to take a DAC to the proverbial next level. We saw how to create and manage ACLs to provide more fine-grained access control over files and directories. We then saw how to create a user group for a specific purpose and how to add members to it. Then we saw how we can use the sgbit and stickybit, the ACLs, to manage the shared group directory. But sometimes that might not be enough to do the job. For those times, we'll have mandatory access control, which we'll cover in the next chapter. I'll see you there. Question: when creating an ACL for a file in the shared directory, what must you first do to make the ACL effective? Remove all normal permissions from the file for everyone except for the user. Ensure that the file has the permissions value of 644 set. Ensure that everyone in the group has read-write permissions for the file. Ensure that the suite permission is set for the file. What is the benefit of setting the suite permission on a shared group directory? None. Is a security risk and should never be done. It prevents members of the group from deleting each other's files. It makes it so that each file that gets created within the directory will be associated with the group that's also associated with the directory. It gives anyone who accesses the directory the same privileges as the user of the directory. Which of the following commands would set the proper permissions for the marketing shared group directory with the SGID and sticky bit set? sudo chmod 6770 marketing, sudo chmod 3770 marketing, sudo chmod 2770 marketing, sudo chmod 1770 marketing. Which of the following set F ACL options would you use to remove just one specific permission from an ACL? XBR, W, M, X. Which of the following statements is true? When using tar, you must use the ACLS option for both archive creation and extraction in order to preserve the ACLs on the archive files. When using tar, you need to use the ACL option only for archive creation in order to preserve the ACLs on the archive files. When using tar, ACLs are automatically preserved on archive files. When using tar, it's not possible to preserve ACLs on archive files. Which two of the following are not valid methods for adding the user Lionel to the sales group? Sudo user add-g sales Lionel, sudo user add-g sales Lionel, sudo user mod-g sales Lionel, sudo user mod-g sales Lionel. By hand editing the etc group file. What happens when you create an inherited ACL? Every file that gets created in the directory with that inherited ACL will be associated with the groups that's associated with that directory. Every file that gets created in the directory with that inherited ACL will inherit the ACL. Every file that gets created in the directory with that inherited ACL will have the same permissions settings in that directory. Every file that gets created in that directory will have the sticky bit set. Which of the following commands would you use to grant read-only privilege on a file to the user frank? Chatter mu frank r some.txt, acl mod u frank r some.txt, get f acl mu frank r some.txt, set f acl mu frank r some.txt. We've just done an ls-l command in a shared group directory. How can you tell from that whether an ACL has been set for any of the files? Files with an ACL set will have plus at the beginning of the permission settings. Files with an ACL set will have minus at the beginning of the permission settings. Files with an ACL set will have plus at the end of the permission settings. Files with an ACL set will have minus at the end of the permission settings. The ls-l command will show the ACL for the file. Which of the following would you use to view the ACL on the some.txt file? Get f-acl some.txt, ls-l some.txt, lsa some.txt, view ACL some.txt. Further reading. Here to create users and groups from the Linux command line. Add a user to a group, SGID and directories, what a sticky bit is and how to set it in Linux. Answers 1a, 2c, 3b, 4d, 5a, 6a and c, 7b, 8d, 9c, 10a.